Peace, family. It's your boy Zay-P. Zay-P the I am. I am that I am, as you are that you are, for we are all that we are. From the individual to the many, for the many comes the all, for the all is one. It's your boy Zay. I'm back at you with a new video. I wanted to come through and drop a couple of messages and insights that Spirit has been sharing with me recently. Lessons that I've been having to work on and deal with or revisit in general. So I'm feeling urged to share some of these messages. So I'm here doing my service and putting out the good word. One of the big questions and conversations that have been coming up is the idea of forgiveness. I've had very powerful lessons about regarding forgiveness in my past. The biggest lesson that I had occurred with my first love, and there was a situation of betrayal with my best friend at the time, things of that nature. Things fall apart. I walked away from that situation feeling just distraught, hurt, all sorts of things that you would feel after a breakup, especially after that first love breakup. You understand? So it's a situation of a heartbreak and anger and remorse and wanting revenge and just all of this really dense, negative, toxic energy. I held on to that energy for a few years. At the time, I was acting professionally, I was DJing, I was doing a lot of things like that. And I started to notice after a couple of years, the joy of performing, the joy of being in the industry, doing something that I love, was really ruined. And I had to take a step back and take a look and see what it was. And I realized that my intentions had got so poisoned, so contaminated by my desire, my pain, and my desire for revenge, or my insistence on holding on to what was. So that was the first message that I had to learn about forgiveness. And that was that forgiveness was not giving permission or saying that it's okay. It was not a situation of like, oh, let me call these people up and tell you, yo, I forgive you, you off the hook. It's nothing like that. It was a process of forgiveness for me, just to let go of the pain, just to let go of that negative, dense, toxic energy. See, what I discovered is that without forgiveness, you're holding on to the pain, you're holding on to the anger, and it's really, although you may feel like you're holding it on righteously, you may feel like this is something that you have to hold on to so that nobody else can violate you in that way, so that your boundaries won't be crossed again in that type of way. So you think you have to hold on to this and justify it by saying, you know, I'm learning this lesson and I'm never going to let that happen to me again. But what you're doing is you're poisoning all of your other intentions, because what I found is that as I held on to that, my intentions, my reasons for doing things became contaminated. When I was performing from a place of love, because I genuinely love to perform, I genuinely love to get on this camera and talk to y'all, or just getting on stage and, you know, presenting a role, whatever the case may be, that love was taken out of it. And instead it was replaced with all of these desires for things like fame, for things like wealth, and not even from a place of, I just wanted growth. I wanted to grow into, you know, a figure that, you know, has some prominence. But it was more like I was getting to the point of just wanting to be famous just so I could rub it in people's faces. So just so I could be like, listen, you see me on TV, you see me in those movies, you see me in that big ass stage right there, so that I could get to a point where the people who had hurt me could not avoid me. And then, this is my logic. Now, just bear with me. This is a very young man. But this is what the anger and the toxic energy had done to my intentions, to something that I loved. Completely took the joy from me, completely took the love out of it. And then I found that all of the successes that I was having started to dwindle, started to diminish. I started walking into auditions no longer happy and excited and enthused, and no longer looking to just do my best and looking to shine and just do what I can, I started walking into auditions like, yo, I need to nail this role because I need to be in something that's going to be big where I can be seen. Or I need to nail this role because, I'm just trying to get that money. I'm trying to get my cake up, because I want to be out and about. I want motherfuckers to see me. Excuse my language. This is not Zay-P the I am. This is just Zay sharing his experiences. So you're going to get the layman. You're going to get the layman terms with me right now. That said, once I realized how that was poisoning my loves, as far as performance, as far as DJing, all of these types of things, it hit me hard. I knew I had to kind of get over it. I had to let go of that poison, toxic energy. And spirit at that time, although I was not as connected with spirit at that time, you receive intuitions, you receive messages. We all are connected. So at that time, I received the epiphany. I had the epiphany of the need to forgive. The need to forgive, not for their sake, but for my own. To be able to let go and release that energy. To be able to transform that so that I could get back to a place of love, so that I could get back to doing things that I was doing, but with love, so that could get back to enjoying my life, to living my life, as opposed to living a life with the intention of impressing others or hurting others or making a scene or whatever kind of petty thoughts that we might have. So that was the first epiphany I had, and this was over 10, 15 years ago. With that said, that's when I learned letting go, forgiving is all for our sake. It is not for the sake of the other. And forgiveness comes in multiple layers. We can forgive people, and that's what we often think about, but forgiveness needs to go across the board. Forgiveness needs to go across the board as far as forgiving situations. Forgiving situations and circumstances that are out of our control. Forgiving experiences that have happened to us that we may be remorseful, or we may be resentful about, or we may feel like somehow responsible for. So it's forgiveness of situations, forgiveness of experiences, forgiveness of circumstances, and then there's forgiveness of ourselves. We forgive others, but we also have to do the work of forgiving ourselves too, because usually with all things in this life, there is an aspect and an element of our own creation of it. All right. Even if you are not somebody who can see that you create your entire reality, everybody knows their lives are their lives. And so the things that we experience, we all know we have some part to play in that. Whether it's, I was in a bad area, or I put myself in a bad environment, or, whatever kind of responsibility you can take, we tend to take that and we tend to beat up ourselves up on it, and we tend to kind of rehash that and tear away at ourselves. So with that said, you want to be able to work on forgiving others. You want to be able to work on forgiving situations, forgiving experiences, forgiving circumstances, but you want to be able to work on forgiving yourself. And sometimes we may not even feel like we are the ones to blame, and that's fine. Whether you're feeling victim mode or whether you're just feeling righteous indignation or whatever it is, you can completely say it's that person's fault, or it's something else's fault, or it's the circumstances that are out of our control. But there's still an aspect of forgiveness that we need to give to ourselves. But the overall point is that the bottom line when it comes to forgiveness is we do the practice of forgiveness for ourselves, so that we may have peace, so that we may come back to a place of love in our own lives, in our own experiences, as opposed to something else. So that was the first thing that I wanted to share with regards to forgiveness. But then, as these conversations have been coming up this past 2 weeks now, between various people, I've been getting people sending me messages about forgiveness. I don't know why. I've been getting all sorts of things, but the sentiment keeps coming up about just this idea of just forgive and forget, or this idea of just, forgiving is just like lip service. People who's like, oh, I forgive you. Like, you get somebody step on your shoe and they're like, oh, I'm sorry. And then you say, okay, you move on and you can just let it go. But not all situations in life are like that. Most situations in life are not like that. So with that said, forgiveness is a process. Forgiveness is not a one-time lip service thing. You're making a mistake and you're fooling yourself if you think, especially with the the things that need to be forgiven. Because if it's something small, very rarely do you ever feel like it needs to be forgiven. You either just forget about it, it's no big deal. Somebody step on my shoes. I mean, if your shoes are clean and white, certain areas they might want to fight over something like that. There might need to be some forgiveness needed. But that said, most small things are like people will just let it go. But the things that you actually feel this is something that would need forgiveness on, those are major things in your life. And that said, you're fooling yourself. You'd be remiss to think that you can just look at it one time and say, okay, I forgive this situation. Okay, I forgive those people, or I forgive myself. And you think it's just a one-time thing and you let it go. That's not how life works. That's not how the mind works. That's not how ego works. I mean, really, that's not how anything works. Life is a process, and all things in life unto it are a part of that process. Same with forgiveness. We have to forgive, and then we have to be willing to re-forgive, willing to revisit that when those triggers come up, when that stimuli comes up. For whatever reason, you can feel like you forgave something, and you can be doing the work. Even if you do the work, you can still find days, months, years later, things might still come up, at which point it's going to require looking at it again and re-forgiving, or looking at it again and just recommitting that intention that you set to forgive, reminding yourself that you forgave this situation, that you let this situation go already. So when you can do that, then you can have the prolonged experience of forgiveness, and you'll be mindful to not allow yourself to fall backwards into the traps, especially ego traps, right? So a lot of things that trigger and kick up dust come from the ego. The story I just shared with you about my ex, the story of my first love, that is forgiveness work that I've done years and years and years ago. Every now and again, it still comes up. I've done that work. I've done the work to forgive myself. I've done the work to forgive the circumstances and situations. And I even eventually got to the point of doing the work to forgive the others, the people whom I, at that time, felt victim to. So even doing that work, this is years and years ago, it can still come up. Those feelings, like me telling this story right now, already I can feel that little pit in my stomach of that loss, that mourning, right? So when they come up, being mindful, through that higher perspective, the lens of God, I can say, okay, there's still some things there. So let me take a moment. Let me go back to my intention. I let all of that go because it was poisoning my life. I didn't need to hold on to all that toxic energy. That's why I let that go. I let go the hatred for these other people because their lives were moving on with or without me. They were living their lives. And that's the third thing about forgiveness. When we hold on to all this stuff thinking that we are somehow righteously justified, thinking that, this is going to be something that, we can throw back in people's faces or whatever the case is, all of that stuff is BS. You're lying to yourself. The fact of the matter is the world moves on. And people's lives go on. Even those who have hurt us, even those who have caused us the greatest bit of trauma. You may feel that you're holding on to this anger, and every time you see them, you could try to make their life hell. But like it or not, every day that person's waking up and they're continuing to live their life. You might throw a rock at them because they pissed you off that day or whatever, but their life continues to move on. And while their lives are moving on and they're moving into these fulfilling, better spaces, you're stuck holding on to energy because you haven't done the work to forgive. So take the time, do your work to forgive. Know that it's a process. Sometimes you have to keep doing the work to forgive, but allow the process, because when you hold on to anger and pain, you're holding on to a poison that does nothing but poison you, and it allows the others to continue on anyway. There's an old saying about anger. The old Zen saying, anger is like drinking poison expecting your enemy to die. But life doesn't work that way. You drink poison, you die. Your enemy's still living on. Stop drinking the poison, let go of the anger, learn to forgive. Not for others, for yourself. It's not you saying what happened was okay. It's you saying, I've learned from it, I'm letting it go. I have new boundaries. I won't let that happen again. But for my own peace and sanity, I am free. Free yourselves. Forgive.